So we're joined from Atlanta by my friend Jahque Bryan-Gooden, AI tech founder, all around expert in education. We thank you so much for taking some time for us today. I've got a room full here with me at Velma Jackson High School. This is our computer science engineering class, and we're recording this for all of our friends in Madison County schools. Madison Central, Rosa Scott, Germantown High School, Ridgeland High School, my friend Angela Jordan over at Shirley Simmons Middle School, my friends Jatoria Kirksey and Angela Reed over at Old Town Middle School, and our YouTube channel. So thank you so much. I know you got the big podcast coming up next week, so this is a good practice run for that as well.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, obviously, we got a lot to talk about with all your AI tools that you've just developed in the education field, as well as your background in education, because you've done some teaching, and obviously, we want to talk about you being an entrepreneur because that is such a popular path for so many of our young people. But you're originally from Pittsburgh, went to Carnegie Mellon University, which is an unbelievable university, and you were the first person in your family to go to college. So just talk about being a first generation college student and going to a prestigious university there in Western Pennsylvania.
Sure, sure. So I'm actually born and raised in New York. And so when I went
Oh,
to
okay.
when I went to Carnegie Mellon, I make a joke that I was just like, I need to get as far away as possible. And Carnegie Mellon definitely was a unique opportunity and it built character. And I really feel like it inspired the path that I took today. So at Carnegie Mellon, the motto is my heart is in the work. And I was like, yes, this is where I need to be because I'm so passion driven, right? I actually see myself as a social entrepreneur and not just an entrepreneur in the typical sense. And so going to Carnegie Mellon and for 4 years telling myself that my heart is in the work, I promise you when I say that it is definitely one of the most rigorous institutions. It is very hard, but after graduating, I kind of felt like, well, I can overcome anything, especially because being first generation, I didn't have the support system and people that understood what it was like, right? To take, an overwhelming amount of credit hours and to go through finals. And so navigating that alone was really difficult because sometimes I felt like I was kind of in a box of isolation. But I think that being active on campus and finding friends and building community really helped. And so I think my biggest thing to first generation students is to ask all the questions, to become friends with your professors. Even to this day, even though I didn't take her course, there's a professor that I still keep in touch with on a professional basis. And so, networking is so important. And I think that is something that's not discussed, right? Like whatever you decide, whatever high school students decide to do, if you do go to college, see that as the main opportunity to grow your network.
Absolutely, and all the internships that these universities have partnerships with corporations, all these student organizations. Because I hear kids all the time, well, I don't really want to be in a fraternity or sorority. Well, you don't have to. You can still find ways to be involved in campus. To still get the college experience, but to build your network because you can have a 4.0 GPA, but if people don't know who you are, especially in this tech space, it's going to be very difficult to find a career. Now, you did mention about if you go to college, and I'm all about giving kids all their options. Social media loves to say that high school teachers in America are pushing kids to go to college, and that is 100% false. We have some great universities here in Mississippi. Obviously, Carnegie Mellon's a great one there in Pennsylvania. We have great HBCUs. We have great PWIs, private and public. And we also have some great community colleges. But as somebody that is in the tech space now, and we have kids that say, look, I'm interested in this area, but I don't really know if I want to do the whole college thing. My family has, I don't know if they can afford it. I don't want to spend 4 years. I don't want to take classes I'm not going to need. So, just as somebody that's in the tech space now, is it really necessary to have the 4 year degree to get into this area?
Oh, that is such a big question. And so I'm going to just pull back some layers because I think it's important for students to make their own decisions, right? And to make those decisions with their
Absolutely.
families. And so I'm just going to share my experience and perspective, which is I went to Carnegie Mellon not to major in computer science. And yet here I am today in the tech space. And I say that because I do believe that, again, it was the experience that I had at Carnegie Mellon, right? So other courses that I took, the way that they helped me understand the world, right? And develop some of like design thinking and investigative skills. like I really was able to think in a different way. And so to be problem and solution oriented is what allowed me to transfer my skills into tech, especially because I had to take a good amount of math courses, right? And so I had a strong foundation, but it wasn't necessarily my major that allowed me to enter the tech and AI space. It was my eagerness. It was me seeing
Very
that there was
good.
a problem. It was me being a self-starter, right? Like I had to learn this on my own. The joke actually is that, my family used to say, you're going to be a career student because I love to learn. And so, they're like, are you going to go get a PhD? And I'm going to be very honest. At one point, I considered, well, maybe I'll go back to school for machine learning because that is what AI is, right? And maybe be able to build something even bigger. I haven't made a decision on that yet. But I say all that to say right now, the stage we are in, so much you can learn online, right? And so much you can learn through other people and through hands-on experience. And so I would say do what you can to get the experience to learn from others. And again, back to that network piece. I do think the idea of like, oh, I don't want to take all these classes and I don't want to do this for 4 years. I think there's a part of college or even working that builds character and builds resilience. And so if you can't do the hard things now, how will you be able to do them later? And so whatever path you choose, like you do have to be resilient and say, I'm not going to give up and I'm going to see this thing through. I actually had a high school teacher that used to say to me and to all of my peers, do what you have to do now so you can do what you want to do later.
Wow.
And so that clearly stuck with me, and I hope it sticks, to the folks that are listening. You have to do the hard things now. You have to do the prerequisites now so you can do what you want later.
Absolutely. And another one I always say is sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do to live how you want to live. So this, it's not always easy and it's not always fun, but you have to look at the outcome you want at the end. So that was a great point. I was not expecting that answer, but that was a really good answer. So I'm glad we got a different perspective because I'm all about giving kids all the different perspectives that they can use as they make their decisions. Now, after you left Carnegie Mellon, you did go to Columbia University in New York City and did something else completely not into tech. So just talk about that because that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, sure. So I actually am a person that plans, right? Like I had a plan since high school. I had a plan when I got to college, and then I got to grad school and I was like, okay, like I'm somewhat on the plan. So the big takeaway here would be to make a plan. It is okay if the plan doesn't work out. It is okay if you pivot. But the bigger picture is that I'm rooted in my why. And so between going to Carnegie Mellon, between going to Columbia to get a master's in education policy, and then working for NYU and doing consulting, all focused on culturally responsive education and research, was rooted in the why. And the why is like, what can I do to ensure that education provides equal opportunities to all students, to ensure that education is engaging, and that students, take classes and they're not like, I never need to use this. Why am I learning this? And so that became my why, really initially seeing education as an equalizer, and a way, towards mobility. And so, yeah, a lot of the work that I did once I graduated Columbia was focused on education. I then created my own organization where I had a podcast platform for students, high school students, to actually talk about issues in their community. And like we found ways to discuss how would they solve them. And so all of that is, it's not tech, but it's all connected in the sense that it
Yeah.
leads back to students and to figuring out how we can amplify voices and use education towards better outcomes for society and for students.
Yeah, and I know I sent you the magazine article where I was interviewed last year, and I talked about we can split hairs all day long about certain issues, but one issue that cannot be disputed is that, especially in Mississippi and other rural states, and especially rural Black communities, resources were not there, access was not there, opportunities were not there, and a lot of things have changed just in the last decade. And people like yourself are really doing a lot to make those things more accessible. And that's where your AI idea came from. And it's really cool and it's pretty new. It's something that you've just done in the last few months. And you showed me the website, but I would love to hear more about this and for the students to hear about it because you've tied in AI to school to make it where everybody has a seat at the table. And, we've talked about this in this class from other guests is when you have AI, it still has to be programmed by a human. And with this only one type of human programming that, things are going to fall through the cracks. I always reference Dr. Misty Freeman, and I'll have to connect you with her as well. She speaks every year in this class and talks about, when AI is written, if somebody writes it that is only a white male every single time, it doesn't mean that they're racist. It doesn't mean that there's evil in their heart or they're doing things intentionally, but they're not going to have the same experiences. They're not going to have the same perspective. So that's something that you've really done a lot to change and something that you've done with your new AI tool. So I would love to hear about this and love for the kids to hear about it.
Yes, yes, yes. I completely agree with what that wonderful speaker said. And that is exactly why I built this because I had the luck, thankfully, I had the foresight to say, I see where we're headed as it terms to utilizing AI, right? And
Yeah.
every space we can imagine and think of. And if I'm being honest, at first I was hesitant because I said, if, like you said, we have the same individual that is behind the scenes doing the one to train it, we're going to keep having the same experiences. And so then I said, well, there are a few problems here in education, right? One is that, yes, there are teachers, I'm sure, like yourself, who want to make connections between students' everyday experience, between their community and what's happening in the lesson, right? Like you want students to understand why what they're learning is important and how to apply it in the real world. But then what's happening is they're like, well, I don't know how to do that with every lesson, right? So that becomes one issue. And then the second issue is that young people are like, okay, but do you really understand me, right? Because this doesn't reflect my my home values, right? My culture, my community. And so that is when I said, you know what, I could leverage AI because if we allowed every educator to say, you know what, I do want to have an understanding of my students without feeling like I need to know every single thing about every student's culture, right? And that's where AI comes in and supports in that way. And I did a lot of the training myself, clearly, right? And that's why when people use it, they're like, oh, I put the same thing in ChatGPT and it didn't give me the same output. And I said, well, of course it wouldn't. Because I'm the one, I'm the one that did the training. And so that's a little bit about my tool. I'm at the phase now where I think that so often we talk about empowering the teacher, and I think it needs to be an and, which is how do we empower the student and how do we give them agency over their learning? So that way it's a kind of like co-teaching model, right? Of shared power. And so what that looks like to me in terms of the next phase that I'd like to take it to is figuring out how I can get students to actually see what some of the inputs and outputs are like and actually support in building it, right? And not just testing it, because I think we don't need to just keep having students being on the receiving end of sitting in the class and giving you feedback, but of actually helping be an architect of what they would like to see, of what they would like to learn.
Absolutely, and I love the term you use for it, CRE, culturally responsible education, because that's not leaving anybody out. It's not putting anybody ahead of anybody, but it's just including everybody. Because especially the face of our nation is changing, and even here in our district, we have a lot of immigrants. We have a lot of children of first generation Americans. We have a lot of kids that have grown up speaking an additional language besides English. We have a lot of children that may be dealing with some type of disability. So it's very important that when it comes to education, especially public education, nobody's left behind. And it's so cool that AI is such a big part of that in bringing everybody together.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
And now, obviously, even if we have kids that say, "Look, AI is stupid. I'm never going to work in tech. I'm just going to I'm going to open my own business, and I'm just going to make a bunch of money." And we support entrepreneurship. We've had several alums, just from Velma Jackson here, open their own business, small businesses. We have some that have already become full-time entrepreneurs, and even
Right.
some that are just doing side hustles while they're in college. And it can be very lucrative. It can be very rewarding. But I think it's important to talk about every time we have an entrepreneur to talk about how difficult it really is. Because, and I know they get so sick of hearing this example, but I always laugh because I'm a huge fan of Jasmine Sullivan's music. But I just cringe every time I hear the song where she talks about, I'm just going to move to Atlanta, I'm going to open a business, and I'm going to be rich. And I'm like, it doesn't work like that. So, as somebody that, that's been an entrepreneur for a long time and now had changed areas that you're an entrepreneur in, a lot of the principles are the same. So, whether you want to own a trucking company or whether you want to own an AI company, business principles are going to remain the same across the board. Because in the example I always use, there's another guest of this class that's a doctor, and she was the first black GI doctor in the state of Mississippi, was saving people's lives, was really doing a lot of things on the cutting edge of stomach and colon cancer. But then she decided to go on her own. And she said, look, I had learned everything there was to know about taking care of patients. I could save anybody's life, but I knew nothing about how to run a business. So you can be very, very skilled at a technical aspect, but running a business is a whole nother monster. So just talk about the learning curve because I know a lot of kids say, I want to be an entrepreneur because I want to set my own hours. I want to be my own boss. I don't want to work for anybody. But there's a lot of planning and a lot of time management that goes into it. So just talk about that because this is something that I love talking about.
Yes. Okay. So I'm actually going to share something, and I don't know if you're going to agree with it, but again, this is just my my experience. When I decided to take the plunge into entrepreneurship, I actually started with the what can I solve and then moved into
Yep.
what can I sell.
Yep.
And
There you go.
so I say that because, and this is like, no shade to other people that take a more traditional approach, which is like you need to maximize your profits, right? How much are you pulling in? How much revenue? Like all of those things, they matter because clearly you need to make money. But I think that starting with the what can I solve and then moving to what can I sell is what kept me in entrepreneurship this long. And I say that
Ah,
because there are days, right, where I'm just like, I haven't hit my ideal kind of like number yet, right? Like I'm not making as much as I'd like to make. Should I give up? But then I hold on to what did I say I was going to solve? And so, because of that, I think that is what allowed me to have that endurance, right? Because it really is endurance. In terms of the learning curve, I'm so glad you asked about this, and I do hope to touch on this on the podcast as well. The learning curve to going from a direct service, right? Because all of the entrepreneurship stuff that I did was a direct service, whether it's me showing up to do after school programming podcasts, whether it's me doing grant writing, whether it is me doing professional development, that is me providing a direct service. I feel like going from that to a tech tool was definitely a learning curve because I had to say, again, like you said, the principles are the same. I'm still also focused on the social entrepreneur aspects, but understanding all the other pieces in business I had to learn. Whether that is the pricing, whether that is, customer onboarding, all of those things. I actually, I mean, I'm still learning if I'm being honest, right? It's an iterative process. But I will say that I found as many programs that I could find, as many people that I could reach out to. And so truly, I don't think that I would be where I am today in terms of my CRE buddy, that's the name of my tool in my business. Had I not had such strong mentors in my corner that have years of experience in entrepreneurship, right? Years of experience, specifically in selling a tool and creating a solution. And then not to go back to college, but to go back to network, right? Like it takes 2 seconds to reach out to someone on LinkedIn. It takes 2 seconds to say, I'm going to go to this local shop and I'm going to just talk about my interests and see how I can shadow them or see what I can learn from them. Because it is those experiences of me showing up to places, of me doing the cold calls, of me saying, hey, I went to this school. I see you did too. That allowed me to get some of those mentors and some of that support. I think the challenging piece is that sometimes I'm finding that being in this space, and being a Black woman in this space, I don't have the same access to capital as people that might not be in even the same stage as I am in terms of developing their products, right? And so now it's fully developed, right? But to know that there are people that are still in the idea phase or still in what they called MVP stage, so minimal viable product, and already have funders, it definitely is, an inequity. And so I have had to spend a lot of time figuring out, well, what can I do really to overcompensate for the fact that I don't have the financial support that others might. And then that's where leaning on my network has come in. I haven't reached the stage yet where, I've sold, as they say, to friends. Well, I've fundraised for friends and family. Like we talk about that and building up capital. But I think that's also when I do get there where networking is important, right? Like who you know and leveraging that and recognizing that you have whether it be a special skill or something that makes you unique that will help others gravitate towards you and support you in your endeavors.
Love it. And again, and it's mycrebuddy.com is the site where the tool is launched. I was able to look at it for a little while today. Very impressive, very cool, and it's really going to make a huge difference. Now, something that I know you want to talk about is you talked about you want to have students help you build this, and you were wanting to have some of our students, if they're interested, work with you over the summer. Just here and there, shout at you. So just talk about how they can do that, and what that would entail, and how they can contact you if they're interested.
Yes, yes. So I would love to take on some student interns. And we can talk about your interest. We can separate it by subject because right now my CRE buddy works across multiple subject areas. So if you are a student that is interested specifically in history or social studies, or a student is interested in math, science, like whatever subject you're interested in, if you would like to kind of become a domain expert in that subject, then I'm happy to have a conversation about what that looks like, and for you to get to see some of the behind the scenes. So, of course, it'll be virtual, right? Since I'm in Atlanta. But if you are interested, you can email info@mycrebuddy.com.
Yeah, and I'll send that as well in case anybody missed it. I'll send that with the email that all the teachers get with this. So especially some of our up and coming ninth graders that are in eighth grade now, I think this would be the perfect time to get in on this. And also, and we talked about getting experience in these things. They have the opportunity while they're in high school to get IT certifications before they ever graduate. So at
Nice.
our at Madison Career and Technical Center, I know they're getting ready to go to high school. They may not be aware they can take that IT program, get experience with it now, then they can start applying for jobs for from people like you. So it really
Yes.
is something they can get into now, and building that network. It's never too early to start building a network, especially when it comes to the virtual space. More and more things are being virtual. More and more things are going to be tech based. So doing that now, and it's the old saying was, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I always take it one step farther. It's who knows you. So
Mm, I
you
like
can know
that.
them, but if they don't know you, it's really hard to get your foot in the door. But I do have a couple of questions from the students. Um, and I like this first one. This is Rashawn Smith. He's a senior. He's getting ready to graduate, but I still think this is a valid question. He asked, in your opinion, how could schools use AI more?
Great question. So thank you for that. So as of the moment, my tool is not used for students, right? Like students are not logging on. It is the teachers that are using it. And so when I think about the ways that my tool and other tools can be leveraged to support education, I think the goal is to make sure that we are not replacing the teacher, but we are helping make the teacher more effective. And what I mean by that is that right now there are a lot of tools on the market that focus on saving time, saving time. And yes, your time is incredibly precious, right? Like your schedule's packed, but there's an and the and is how can we really get to making sure that whatever needs you have as a teacher and becoming a better teacher, that AI can support you in doing that. And so I think that's one way, right? Like, again, thinking about making sure that tools can be leveraged in a way to help teachers become more effective, to help teachers really imagine and live out the vision that they have for how students should learn. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I got time for one more, and I love this one. This is Bryson Stevens. He's in ninth grade. His brother is actually active duty Air Force in Alaska and is getting into tech through the military. So that is another great way that isn't talked about enough because, especially with all these technological advancements, the military is really a great place to get tech training. But he asked, what do you think is the hardest part about learning AI?
Hmm. It's also a pretty big question. Let's see. I mean, I think there are so many ways that that question can be answered, right? Like, so first, there's the piece about using AI, and then which is like prompt engineering, right? And so, like, putting in the right prompts. But then there's also the piece about how can we use AI to build, right? And what's hard about that? And so, I want to speak a little bit about the latter, which is when I first entered this space, I kept saying, like, well, I want to build my own large language model, right? Which is LLM. And everyone kept saying, that's so expensive. That's so expensive. But I couldn't meet anyone that would tell me, okay, well, what makes it expensive? right? Like,
There you go.
how come no one's explaining this to me? And so I think at that time, now it's a little bit more open, right? You can kind of Google, like, okay, it's GPUs and energy, like all those things. But before that, I think what stuck out to me is the fact that just because someone else tells you you can't doesn't mean that you need to run with that, right? Like just keep finding other ways and keep talking to the people you need to talk to in order to have a better understanding of how to use AI, or of how to solve the problem using AI. I think in terms of prompts, I think maybe it's not hard, but to me, one of the things that we talk about too much is like how to use AI to write a grocery list, how to use AI. And it's like you are not maximizing the impact that this technology can have. And quite frankly, and this isn't talked about enough, so I'm going to say it here. Quite frankly, like you're wasting resources because it takes a lot of water to cool down these systems. And so for you to say, oh, I'm going to use AI instead of just using Google, I think that we need to be mindful of that. Like if we are going to integrate AI into everyday life, we need to see that the question is not necessarily what's hard about using it, but what is the most appropriate way to use it, to maximize its impact and also to minimize the negative impact that it can have on society.
Absolutely, man. That was a great answer. We're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for taking some time for us. But again, just a couple things before we go. First of all, mycrebuddy.com and then info@mycrebuddy.com is where they can email you and they can just put, I saw your presentation. I'd love to work with you. To have more information, just something real simple. But one thing you mentioned that I wanted to hit on right before we go is you talked about the difficulty of being a black woman in this space because even though we've had several in this class, and the number is growing, it's still such a minuscule part of the tech space. And look, you will never hear an argument from me. It is tough to do things when you've never seen it done in your community. But it is also very okay to be the first to do something and to be the best at something. So just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean it can't be done, and it doesn't mean it can't be done exceptionally. So as these kids are starting to make decisions about where they want to take their life, and they say, "Look, this may be interesting, but I don't know anybody that's done it." That's fine. So what can they do to overcome those obstacles of thinking, saying they can't do it? Because we've already decided AI isn't going anywhere. These jobs are going to get more high tech. So these are things that's really going to need their input.
Yes. Oh, I love how you reframe that. And I agree that just because you've never seen anyone do it doesn't mean you can't be the first. And so I want to say this. It's a really quick story. When I was in high school, I transferred schools while I was in New York City. I went from a smaller high school to a bigger high school that was a lot more competitive. And the principal sat, at this time we had interviews. This principal sat me down, interviewed me. He said, your grades are great. And at the other school, you were a big fish in a pond. And now here, you're going to be a small fish in a lake. And I was like, but then he said to me, he started seeing me in the hallways and how I was, being more active in high school. And he said, hey, big fish. And so I say that to you that all of you are big fish in my eyes. And so always remember that you can do anything that is cliche as it sounds. You can do anything you put your mind to. And then there's the and, right? The and is see how other people are solving things. See if there are other people that are like you and that are not like you, right? Even though they're not from your community that you can reach out to. And also I'm here to offer myself as someone that's happy to be a resource and connect other students to anyone that I may know. Because again, like you said, the power of who do you know and who knows you. And so be a big fish.
Love it, man. That is such a great quote. I'm going to use that a lot. But we thank you so much for joining us. Fitness in your schedule, Jahque Bryan-Gooden. I hope I said it right. All the way from Atlanta. We thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you have a great day. Well, and we're definitely going to do this again. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, see ya.